Spider-Man No Way Home is around the corner. I'm very excited. With 5, possibly 6 villains on loan from other Spider-Man movies, Tom Holland sure is going to have his work cut out for him. If only some other Spider-Men could turn up to help. Pre-sales for this movie have gone through the roof, the hype is real, I'm very excited. And if it's good, it could be one of the best Spider-Man movies ever. With that in mind, I want to rank every single theatrical release from worst to best. And oh boy, I'm going to put some dirt in your eye.
Gonna cry?
Before I start this ranking, I just want to say that I haven't had time to cover every single aspect I either love or hate about all of these movies. Partly because I've already done several video essays on Spider-Man in the past that have touched on several specific aspects, and I don't want to repeat myself here, but also just because there's a lot of grounds to cover, and it's going to be impossible for me to say absolutely everything I'd want to say on these movies and keep it under 5 hours. I've tried to give a general overview where I can, and for some of the things that I like and dislike, go into a bit more detail. And finally, they're just movies. If you disagree with my top spot or my worst pick, it's not going to change the colour of mustard. You can still go home and put your Blu-ray in your player, and I can put my Blu-ray in my player, and we can watch the Spider-Man movies that we love, completely unimpeded by other people. It's great. Let's take it from the top. I mean bottom. The Amazing Spider-Man. I hated this movie when it came out. It was painful reading from the news that Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 4 had been cancelled and replaced by this, a reboot. And the wound remained fresh all the way up to the summer 2012 release date. Tobey Maguire was out, Andrew Garfield was in. Sam Raimi was out, Mark Webb was in. It felt like an unnecessary reboot for a franchise that didn't need that much course correcting, at a time where the superhero boom was spurred on by interconnected universes. What was this movie going to give us that the first Spider-Man origin movie hadn't already? How else could you possibly reskin the well-worn and well-known origin story to appeal to a new audience? How could you make it interesting again? Whatever the way to do it is, this movie does not do it. This movie sucks. It sucked back then, and I've watched it very recently, and I can tell you for certain that it still sucks now. My God, The Amazing Spider-Man is an exercise in futility.
Okay.
A boring, rambling mess of a film that has no idea what it wants to be, drawing from other more successful superhero movies without any of the flair, heart, or fun. It's a dry affair spurred on only by the chemistry between Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy. The connection is palpable, if only because they really were falling in love off set. However, I can't stand all the improvised banter and heart eyes that they do. It gets old really quick, and there's so many instances where the scene just needs to cut.
No, don't. Okay, no, forget that. I'm not gonna talk about that. I'm gonna talk about me. I was touching up stuff.
You're touching up stuff?
Come on. I was. It's impossible. I wish I could just. I can't. So, you want to, I don't know.
I don't know for sure if it's improv conversations, but a lot of it certainly sounds like improv. And it is bad, unfunny improv. Mike Lee this ain't. The main thing derailing both these Amazing Spider-Man movies is their obsession with this untold story. A loosely fabricated breadcrumb trail that does little in the way of entertainment value, but a lot in the way of tainting the core values of what Spider-Man stands for.
There's something else that Norman doesn't know. The human DNA that I implanted in the spiders was my own.
Spider-Man is not Peter Parker's destiny. He isn't part of an intricate web of corporate sabotage, part of a dynasty working towards cross-species superhumans. There is no need for the Parkers and Oscorp to be so intertwined, or for Peter to have to investigate his father's work. None of this is interesting, and you don't even get the answers you want in the first movie. In fact, this movie's plot is all over the place. So many threads and ideas get tossed by the wayside, never getting brought up again. So many payoffs never materialise. In the original movie, Peter finding and confronting Uncle Ben's killer is a big deal.
Thanks.
It's a powerful scene and a key moment in the lead up to the birth of Spider-Man. It is crucial in teaching him about mercy as well as responsibility. Here, Uncle Ben's death is a complete afterthought. You can tell they just had to put it in to tick off the checklist of notes on the origin story. And And Peter gives up trying to find the killer halfway into the movie. It's literally never brought up again, and the sequel doesn't address it. I don't know if they were trying to go for a vengeance isn't the answer type deal with this whole killer thread, but dropping it entirely is just lazy and weird and just adds to the overall disjointed mess that is the first Amazing Spider-Man film. And the Lizard. Oh boy, I think the Lizard might be the worst cinematic Spider-Man villain. His motivation is so wafer-thin and nonsensical. He wants to upgrade humanity by turning everyone into giant lizards, bring about some kind of new social equality, yada yada yada. It's a mess. It's awful. It's got nowhere near the depth of the motivations of the Raimi villains, and it doesn't make any sense within the bounds of its movie. There's not a single enthralling fight scene against the Lizard in this movie either. The first two encounters Spidey has with the Lizard are so brief they barely even register. There's a really silly fight in the school, which has an awful, overblown Stan Lee cameo. And this moment, where Connors creates a grenade out of some random chemicals in science class. They should have made this guy feel more vicious. He's a fucking giant dinosaur! And plus, he wants to turn everyone into lizards, right? Well, why don't we see Spidey and his supporting cast fighting off lizard people? We see people getting infected with lizard juice, but it amounts to nothing. And it seems like a missed opportunity to see Spidey take on a villain with a small army. That's something we never really saw in the Raimi movies. They never had any hired muscle. But the worst thing for me is honestly Andrew Garfield's version of Peter Parker. I should preface this by saying that I really like Garfield as an actor, and he starred in tons of things in which I think he's phenomenal, from Scorsese's Silence, to Mainstream, to Under the Silver Lake, and honestly many more. But I do not like this Peter Parker. He is a selfish, mugging douchebag. He fucks over that guy at the internship just so that he can snoop around Oscorp. He ruins all these tables and chairs and then moves on like nothing ever happened. He seems to have zero consideration for other people other than Gwen Stacy and his own family. I don't even know why he's trying to save people. Where does this epiphany come in at the movie? At first he's just trying to hunt down his uncle's killer. He's neurotic and arrogant, and his joke's really, really great on me.
Is that a real knife? Yes, it's a real knife. My weakness, it's small knives.
I know this is a personal preference, but hey, I just can't get behind this Peter Parker. I think he's so irritating. This movie is just relentlessly dull. It looks awful, the villain is weak. It's a soulless reboot created only to usher out the old continuity, and it is a crying shame. This is hands down the worst Spider-Man movie, and I have no intention of ever really watching it again outside of this and as prep for No Way Home. Why would I?
Well, see ya.
Whilst you were out thinking about Spider-Man movies, I was indoors studying the blade. With today's sponsor, Kamikoto.
Knew this was coming, Pete.
They sent me this gorgeous Kanpake knife set made from authentic Japanese steel. It includes a vegetable knife, one slicing knife, don't they all slice? And one utility knife to tackle the smaller, more intricate chores in the kitchen. It's not hard to sell these babies to you, is it? They do exactly what you'd expect. They cut stuff real good. Real good. I've been wanting a knife set for cooking for a little while, and this has been perfect. Kamikoto only uses steel sourced from mills in Japan, and each knife comes in a naughty ashwood box. Kamikoto knives each come with a lifetime guarantee as well, because they're as close to adamantium as you're gonna get.
Holy shit.
Right now, Kamikoto has a big sale going on and is offering an additional $50 off of any purchase with my link. Visit kamikoto.com/fullfat and use my code FULLFAT for an extra $50 off today.
And I will be like a god to them.
A god named Sparkles?
The Amazing Spider-Man 2 dumps the Nolan-like colour palette and faux grittiness to try and catch up with the MCU. Shared universe origins abound, a colourful new costume, and more villains than you can shake a stick at.
What is all this stuff? The future.
Many people consider this sequel to be worse than its predecessor, but honestly, I think this one is marginally better and marginally more fun, and I would honestly rather watch The Amazing Spider-Man 2 than The Amazing Spider-Man 1. It's a lot easier on the eyes, and it has a few more so bad it's good qualities. We'll get to Electro in a minute.
Don't you
The swinging is actually really awesome in this movie. There's a great sense of speed, and Garfield's spider moves in this really distinctive, agile way, and you can tell they really listened to the criticism of the first movie's swinging. The unbroken shots of Spider-Man swinging and traversing are pretty cool, and there's even some great usage of slow-mo. Garfield himself is better this time around. He's a bit less of an obnoxious Peter Parker, but he's still working from an absolutely woeful script.
The only thing that's gonna save his life is my blood, is Spider-Man's blood.
The physical comedy just doesn't work for me. What is this?
A hot latte all over your... I didn't do that. Oh, no, and you too. All right, on your way. I'm sorry, I'm all thumbs today.
And this just... oh, so irritating.
There he is. There he is.
I find so much of this character just insanely cringe.
Nice arm. It's just the wrist. It's just all in the wrist, buddy.
One thing The Amazing Spider-Man 2 does have going for it, I quite like the Alicia Keys song.
It's on again. It's on again. Whoa.
I guess Sony liked her work on Another Way to Die. She's got a great voice as ever, and it unexpectedly lends just a little bit of cool to this incredibly not cool movie. I know the Amazing Spider-Man 2 costume also gets a lot of love, but personally I've always found the colours on it to be a little bit off, and aside from the big bug eyes, it is just a direct lift of the Raimi outfit. Even the textures look similar. It looks better in motion than the first Amazing Spider-Man suit, but I at least appreciated what they were going for first time around. Here you can tell they went fuck it and tried to appeal to as many people as possible with the outfit. This has a similar problem to Spider-Man 3 in that there's multiple plots and villains vying for your attention. Except here, all of the villains suck ass.
Please! I know what it's like to be thrown away, please!
Jamie Foxx is playing Jim Carrey, playing the Riddler in 1995, playing Electro, and I'm here for it.
Whoa, well, look who's here. Spidey. How was your morning? Aces, Max. All the crime fighting you've been doing, and all of a sudden you take time out to come visit little old me, Max. It's amazing to...
You were supposed to understand.
It is delightfully awful. A lot of this movie actually feels like an unintended ode to the Schumacher era of Batman.
It's my birthday. Now it's time for me to light my candles.
But it doesn't have the charm of either of those movies, especially not Batman Forever. Electro fares a little better than the Lizard. I at least understand why he wants to fight Spider-Man, even though it's like preschool level depth. I can tell what kind of a person he is. He's a fucking lunatic.
You're no Spider-Man. He's a Leo. You're a Sagittarius. You will Spectrum again. I'm gonna rip your well-groomed head off.
He'll be willing to team up with you as long as you tell him that you really need him. He really wants people to need him, guys. It's weird that after he becomes full tilt Electro, he stops being dorky Max Dillon for no apparent reason and just starts acting like Jamie Foxx. I love that he wants to cause a blackout so that everyone will be a loser like him. How far the Spider-Man villains have fallen since the time of the Raimi series.
Misery, misery, misery. That's what you've chosen.
The other weird thing about Electro is he's obscenely powerful. He can fry people instantly, he can reform from pure electricity, and he's focused enough to stop and restart hearts. He is kinda ridiculously OP. And it is cool for Spider-Man to take on a villain that vastly outmatches him, but in practice all of the confrontations with Electro are similarly underwhelming. The Times Square battle is barely a battle, much like the sewer scene in the first Amazing Spider-Man. The way the negotiation with Dylan breaks down is just predictable and weak. And then the final battle is just a pure CGI-a-thon. And it's well done CGI, some of the angles are cool. Spidey is as acrobatic as ever. But it lacks the tactile feeling from a fight like with the Goblin or Doc Ock or even the Vulture. It really lacks a punch. I'm really happy that Marvel have decided to revamp Electro for No Way Home. He looks so much cooler, the gold electricity is so much better. I'm just happy to see Jamie Foxx go on about how much he's not blue and how happy he is about it.
And she was explaining to me it was gonna be hot, you know, and I didn't have to be blue. A brand new start, a brand new look. The blue when we did it the first time, it was, look, Look, man, I didn't care. This new is fly. The homies is like, okay, we get you now. You know, when I was blue, they still roll with me. But okay, you blue.
He's finally not blue! It would be nice to not have Fox buried under special effects. Maybe he'll have more free reign to give an actual good performance this time. I'm equally disappointed that they gave Electro an upgrade, but not the Lizard. He's still got that awful design from the first Amazing Spider-Man movie. He looks exactly how he did. Give us the lab coat and the snout, come on. Rhino barely counts as a baddie, but you could tell in the marketing that they really wanted you to believe that there were 3 villains. Jesus, that mech is shite. You can't be rocking up in that when Iron Man's in cinema screens concurrently. Hell, I'd rather be the Quest Aerospace guy. But the cherry on the shit cake is Dane DeHaan's Green Goblin. He drops into the movie and we're meant to believe that Peter and Harry are lifelong old-time best friends. They haven't met since they were, 11? They're now in their late teens. It just feels like an awkward way of retconning in their friendship when he didn't appear in the first movie. The pair have very little chemistry.
Now, there's nothing to distract from your unibrow. There he is. There he is. My manservant holds the hairdryer, but I work the comb. Okay, so...
It's awkward, and you just don't buy DeHaan as any kind of threat. Harry needs Peter's magic Star Trek Into Darkness blood to save himself from the Green Goblin curse. Peter says no, for reasons unclear. I guess he just doesn't trust Oscorp, but he seems to trust Harry, and it seems weird to see Spider-Man so casually just refuse to save someone from death. Surely even at the cost of giving his blood to Oscorp, Peter would be distraught trying to find a way to make everything work. Wouldn't Peter be a bit more tormented by this decision? Wouldn't he try and do everything he can to save Harry? This is why I like the notion that Peter will be turning on Doctor Strange to save the villains in No Way Home.
Sorry, kid.
Yeah, me too.
Don't.
That feels very Peter Parker. But anyway, Harry becomes the Green Goblin, his costume is fucking ridiculous, glider is fucking awful, but whatever. The fight is actually okay. But much like all of the battles in the webverse, the fight is over before it barely gets going. And then we arrive at the only bloody thing this movie has going for it. Nah, just kidding. She dead. So of course it follows through on some actual lasting stakes and kills Gwen. She was a well-liked character and Emma Stone was great in the role, so this does feel like a legitimate gut punch. There is no doubt that this was a good decision that would have lasting ramifications for the Spider-Man story. Peter is always tormented by the notion that the people around him might come to harm simply because they are associated with him. And here, that nightmare is fully realised.
Different paths. We're not on different paths. You're my path. And you're always gonna be my path.
Of course, now it seems oddly mean-spirited to end Garfield's final Spider-Man movie on the death of his girlfriend. I guess he just has to go off and be lonely. You never get quite the closure on his story that you'd want. Maybe now we will.
Toby. Yeah, baby! Yeah.
The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is very similar to its predecessor in the fact that it has no main narrative thrust driving it. Instead, things just kind of happen and everything just feels like a setup for the future, and it feels like it's just setting you up for the promise of something else slightly more interesting further down the line. It's more fun and easier to look at, but it's also relentlessly boring and crap.
Crap, mega crap.
The action is crap, the villains are awful, and this marks the second time a Spider-Man movie has been so divisive that it has prompted a studio rethink. The legacy of these movies is ultimately one of failure. They tried to tell a new version of the Spider-Man mythos, simultaneously enamoured by a bullshit past and obsessing over the promise of a multi-franchise future. It rarely spent any time focusing on the now, and the characters all suffered for it. I'm really excited for Andrew Garfield to come back as Spider-Man, but not because of these movies. With a better script, I'm hoping the actor that I've seen in countless great movies since 2014's misshapen sequel will finally get a chance to shine as Spidey. It would be great if we get one truly good Andrew Garfield Spider-Man appearance in No Way Home, alongside the less tattered legacy of Holland and Maguire. If you'd like to hear me talk about these movies in a bit more detail, then please check out this video on The Timeless Child, or this video on Under the Silver Lake.
Hands! Mask! Copy!
All right, have it your own way.
Mask! Copy!
When I originally started this list, I didn't think to include the Venom movies, because they feel pretty divorced from the Spider-Man films to me, but I figured people would want to know where I'd rank them. So quickly, Venom is not a masterpiece. It isn't even really so bad it's good filmmaking. Sure, Tom Hardy is a lunatic in it, those poor lobsters.
What? Yeah, but I think I may have been infected.
And I enjoy the symbiote referring to himself as a loser.
On my planet, I am kind of a loser, like you.
It can be entertaining at times, I'll admit that, but it is largely a mess. With a boring villain packaged in gunmetal grey, who the fuck's idea was that? Make it bright yellow or blue or something, anything so that he can stand out against Tom Hardy's Black Venom. Come on! It's a waste of Riz Ahmed's talents, it's a waste of Michelle Williams' talents, and yes, it's a waste of Tom Hardy's talents.
Like, aliens?
aliens.
The action is more entertaining when Venom can fight standard enemies and just kind of Hulk out. Suffice to say, I would take this movie over any of the Garfield fare. This movie was greenlit after the Maguire era Spider-Man 3, and languished in development hell all the way into the Tom Holland era. It's weird to think of an alternate timeline with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 4 and a Venom spin-off that is set in the same universe. If it had come out around 2009, it would have been edgy as hell, and I kind of wish I could see how that turned out. I know Flash wasn't Venom in the comics by then, but could you imagine Joe Manganiello as Flash Thompson Venom? That would be awesome. I would love to see that movie.
I don't want to fight you, Flash.
I wouldn't want to fight me neither.
I didn't purposely try to lump the Amazing movies and the Venom movies together on this list, but it's just kind of worked out. It feels right to put both sequels just slightly above their predecessors when I think about it. Venom Let There Be Carnage is the superior Venom film, no question.
Cleaning toilets!
It's shorter, more fun. It has a baddie of a villain this time in Carnage, played by a delightfully scenery-chewing Woody Harrelson. I love that the title characters only come to blows at the very end. And it's a pretty good fight considering how often two CGI behemoths clashing like this can often look like mashed pudding. I could have done with more Natural Born Killers vibes from Cassidy and his evil girlfriend Shriek, but whatever. It's a fine movie, not like fine dining, more like a British, it's fine, you know? And I love that it is 90 minutes long. More superhero movies need to be 90 minutes. Cassidy bites Brock and that somehow transfers his symbiotic abilities and Carnage is born, and that's literally all we need to know. Who the hell cares why? It is mercifully short, and that is great. Also, the gay bar scene featuring Little Sims is a work of genius. Venom Let There Be Carnage isn't exactly great, but there's a fair few other Spider-Man movies I'd brush off in favour of this one. Namely the last three I just spoke about.
No!
God, I'm so sorry.
From here on out we get to the Spider-Man movies that are actually legitimately good in my eyes. They all have some problems, but to say they're bad movies in my opinion is a stretch. Anyway, here's Spider-Man Far From Home.
See, that wasn't so hard.
So Spider-Man Far From Home I guess seems relatively low on this list. But that doesn't mean I don't like it or I don't think there's a decent amount of good stuff here. It's definitely leagues above the amazing stuff. It has a coherent plot and likeable characters, and some okay action. I've definitely got time for Tom Holland's Spider-Man, even if I would like to see a little bit more from him. Far From Home elects to take the superhero out of New York entirely for a Europe-set adventure, and the gimmick works. It's fun seeing Pete, MJ, Ned and his classmates in Venice and London, etc. The dynamic is fun between them and they're just as amusing as they were in Homecoming.
Whatever happened to being an American bachelor in Europe?
Peter, those were the words of a boy, and now that boy's a man.
I do enjoy the high school angle they've taken with these home movies, even if it means we've yet to see Spider-Man take on a truly taxing test. Both this and Homecoming are pretty light comedies, all things considered, with less of an emphasis on combat and action and heartbreak than even its MCU counterparts. The Raimi movies are far more action-filled, and the Webb movies try to be a lot more edgy. But this version of Peter has a lot of Labrador energy, even at the worst of times. That being said, Far From Home does take it a little bit further than Homecoming. Mysterio does try to straight up commit murder by train, but it's hard to find the drama in a battle that takes place between the hero and the villain's drones. Drones are 9 times out of 10 really boring. Whilst I appreciate the subterfuge created by Mysterio, the end result is that Peter doesn't really have that much of a physical matchup in the final battle. Those of you that watched my Mysterio video will know that I really liked the character, and I like his dynamic with Peter as sort of a dark, twisted mentor.
Let's get a drink.
I'm gonna live up to that.
What do you want, Peter?
I don't know.
You're not a jerk for wanting a normal life, kid.
That's a hard path.
People need to believe. And nowadays, they'll believe anything.
It makes sense that he comes disguised as a hero, a viable replacement in a post-Iron Man world, a show-stopping hero with cool, outlandish powers and a big heart. Of course Peter wants to trust him, and he's a kid. Nick Fury makes a welcome return and continues the tradition of him having a larger role in a superhero's second movie in the MCU.
Now!
I really wish him and Maria Hill hadn't been revealed as Skrulls in the post-credits scene. It's a really silly choice and the reason behind it makes it even worse. Watt stated that they didn't think people would believe Nick Fury could be fooled in such a manner by Mysterio. And I just have to say, what? Why not? This feels like a preemptive move to abate fanboy rage. Plus I like Nick Fury and it would be nice if one of the old guard had a relationship with Peter in the new movies. I recently already spoke about the abundance of costumes in the Holland era, and Far From Home is of course the most egregious effort. He hangs onto the Iron Spider long after it's outstayed its welcome, then he's in his classic Stark suit for one scene, then he's in the Night Monkey suit, and then finally he's in the red and black upgraded suit. You know what I would have preferred? The Stark suit from Civil War to Homecoming, the Iron Spider suit for the Infinity Wars, that makes sense, and then just go back to the Stark suit for this movie. Why would he not wear his main costume? And then you could have the red and black upgraded suit as sort of like the big change at the end of the movie. There's no need for the Night Monkey and for him to hold on to the Iron Spider, leaving us with as many as 4 Spider-Man outfits in one movie. The Stark suit represents his relationship to Tony Stark. The upgraded suit is designed by him and represents his growth into being his own man and his own superhero. These suits have meaning, the Night Monkey and the Iron Spider do not. They are transparently there just to sell action figures. Overall, Far From Home is a worthy successor to Homecoming. It's got plenty of laughs with characters I care about, and I'd happily watch it again. It's just not the best of the MCU, nor does it hold a candle to the upper echelon of superior Spider-Man movies. If you want to hear me chat more Far From Home, please check out my video essay on Mysterio, as well as this video on the new Captain America and Spider-Man's future.
Now dig on this.
Strangely, I think I might end up talking about this one for the longest time, even though it's in the middle of the list. But I think that's because A, I kind of have to justify what I like about it a little more, B, it's coming off the back of 2 very good movies, C, I have to be open about what doesn't work, D, unlike almost all of the other movies on this list, I've never really dedicated any time to it on the channel. So yeah, there's a fair bit to unpack here. Spider-Man 3 is hands down the worst Raimi Spider-Man film. It might be overstuffed and altogether messier than the previous installments, but I have to say, it still has a lot of the same artistry that made Spider-Man 1 and Spider-Man 2 great. It's just not quite as tight a package this time around, and there's some silly decisions.
Right now, he can't remember the accident or anything that happened to him recently.
This is all so weird.
There's some great action, a lot of humour, and a lot of heart to be found in Spider-Man 3. At its best, it features dramatic, cathartic moments as good as anything else in the trilogy. I know there's plenty about it to ridicule, and Venom sucks.
I like being bad. It makes me happy.
But I'd still rather take this movie than a lot of the cookie-cutter superhero movies that are peddled today. After Spider-Man 1 and 2 were as tight as they were, with one villain each that made full use of their screen time.
It was my dream. Sometimes
we have to be steady and give up the thing we want the most.
Even our dreams.
Spider-Man 3 is pretty unfocused and nowhere near as well paced, swapping between 3 C-list villains of equal importance, or unimportance.
How's that sound, Tiger?
None of the villains are without merit, even Venom, but they're nowhere near as fully realised as the Green Goblin or Dr. Octopus, and the movie suffers for it. 3 Spider-Man 3 villains cannot equal 1 Spider-Man 1 or Spider-Man 2 villain. This movie often sits next to Batman and Robin as the go-to example of stuffing too many villains into a superhero movie. But I think an important distinction should be made, because plenty of superhero movies feature multiple villains and they're great. The reason why Spider-Man 3's trifecta of villainy doesn't work is because none of these baddies' storylines really interact much, and their grievances with Spider-Man feel like plot lines from separate movies. It gives the film the feeling that we're just going through the motions, even if a lot of what we're seeing is still really good. I feel like they really need to drop one of the storylines to save this movie. It should have been either Harry and Sandman, or Sandman and Venom or something. I think the most sense, honestly, would be Venom and Harry. You get to explore the black suit stuff and have Venom as well as a finale to the Osborn arc started in the first movie. You'd have more time to flesh out Eddie Brock and make him more of a worthwhile villain. Plus, I believe Peter could still need Harry's help in the third act to take the symbiote on. Then again, you'd lose some of the movie's best visual sequences in Sandman. The scene when he first forms, when he first fights Spidey, when he's gigantic at the end, it's all fantastic. His powers are so versatile and pit Spidey against a villain unlike anything he faced in the previous movies. And I like Flip Marko being characterised as a crook with ultimately a good heart. He fits right in amongst the other Raimi villains, even if he is underdeveloped, versus Venom, who feels like he's so obviously shoehorned in to appease the producers and the audience. But I just don't know if I ultimately needed him to factor into Uncle Ben's death in such a way. The retcon doesn't feel too out of place in terms of continuity. I guess it gives black-suited Peter a good reason to try and murder him, but we get the exact same payoff with that when he attempts to murder Harry just a couple of scenes later. Overall, Sandman brings a lot of great spectacle to the movie, but out of the 3 villains, he's the one I probably would have cut the most. The first thing to get right out of the way regarding the new Goblin is that downright awful costume. Across the Raimi trilogy, all of the outfits were stellar. Even the often mocked Green Goblin Power Ranger armour is appealing to me. The mask is angular and iconic, and I can't separate it from that awesome Willem Dafoe performance. A good villain can really sell any costume. But this suit, it's odd. He kind of looks like a ninja on a surfboard, complete with a ski mask. He has a katana on his back, and he's dressed all in black, and did I mention the surfboard? I get the original Goblin design received a mixed response, and it makes sense for Harry to go for a more functional look, but this is way too functional. I think everyone would have preferred a more Goblin-inspired look. I would have loved to have seen the same gadgets and the retractable mask with Harry, but maybe with more of a Hobgoblin style. The all-black outfit is just way too X-Men. One thing I think is massively underrated about the whole Osborn arc is how good both confrontations are.
He was trying to kill me! He killed himself! Shut up!
The Green Goblin was great on foot, and the brutality of that character marked him as one of Spider-Man's baddest foes on film, but the airborne stuff didn't really do too much for us. It was 2002. By the time they came to Spider-Man 3, the spider glider combat is intense. Yeah, the surfboard sucks, but this Goblin is supremely fast and agile. And the camera work keeps up with both characters in the air to marvellous effect. Even though the effects are a bit dated by today's standards, the sense of momentum and power as Harry inches ever closer gives this action scene a lot of weight. Harry swoops in and throws everything at Peter. And to be fair, he does a pretty good job. I think this scene works so well because we're just following Peter trying to get away. It works to make the new Goblin a substantial threat, and it lends more emotional context to their friendship. Peter doesn't want to hurt Harry, not under any circumstances, even when he's trying to kill him. That is until the black suit gets involved. I also really like how the engagement ring factors in. As ever, Spider-Man works best when his domestic life is in direct conflict with his ability to be a hero. Harry has been waiting 2 movies to finally vindicate himself, finishing his father's twisted plan and avenging his death, in a misguided attempt to prove himself worthy of his father's love.
You took him from me. He loved me.
It goes about as well as you'd expect. There's an appropriate level of campy humour coupled with some genuinely brutal moments in the second fight.
Stings, doesn't it?
I protected you in high school, now I'm gonna kick your little ass.
This time there's no airborne combat, and proceedings take a relatively pared down approach. It's basically just a playground brawl until one of them gets sadistic enough to do some real damage. Peter is horrible to Harry, but he only ever speaks in truth.
She doesn't know what you are. He despised you. You were an embarrassment to him.
But he does it purely and simply to torment Harry and kick his arse. Harry is a really pathetic character, and you really just want to see him grow beyond his father and be his own person. Then to top it all off, he attempts his father's signature move and lobs a pumpkin bomb straight at Peter. What transpires is one of the dirtiest bits of Raimi Spidey action. Oh, that's satisfying. The Han Solo Special Edition dodge, the way he effortlessly swings the bomb back at Harry before he gets yeeted in the exact same manner as Peter did. Perfection. On another note, it's quite a choice for Peter to actively try and murder not 1 but 2 villains in the space of 1 movie. Sure, Harry and Sandman survive, but he carries out the finishing blows with maximum intent. He fully believes he's killed Sandman, he straight up admits to it.
Spider-Man killed him.
I like that the symbiote kind of pushes him to fully cross the line. Things could have gone really badly for him, and to be honest, he's just lucky that both of them managed to survive. When he says at the end of the movie that he's done terrible things, it's true, and the forgiveness he's given by both villains at the end feels appropriately powerful because of that.
I've done terrible things too. I should never have hurt you. I've said those things. I forgive you.
None of that matters, Peter.
You're my friend.
Peter learns that he isn't a perfect hero, even if he tries to be. But what matters is whether or not the people around him who love him can forgive him for his mistakes. Underneath the rushed arcs and sloppy pacing, the themes that could be mined from the symbiotic storyline are there. It's just a shame that Venom doesn't get anywhere near enough chances to shine. The Black Suit Spider-Man arc is one of the most muddled things about the movie, but I'd be lying if I said I didn't enjoy Bully Maguire immensely. The montage to People Get Up and Drive Your Funky Soul is iconic, and Peter is just such a dickhead. Look at him. I understand people wanted something darker with the black suit, and maybe the comedy being alongside it is a tough pill to swallow, but personally, I still really enjoy it.
Peter, these are incredible.
If you want the shots, I'll take the staff job. Double the money.
As I said, it's not like he didn't try to murder 2 people straight up. Peter ditches the suit, of course, and with about 20 minutes to go, it leaves little time for Venom to really develop as a villain.
I want you to kill Peter Parker.
Eddie Brock. Topher Grace is a fantastic actor, and much like Andrew Garfield, I've seen him in a bunch of good things outside of Spider-Man. Especially in Things Together, which is the second time I'm going to mention Under the Silver Lake today.
You ever feel like you fucked up somewhere a long time ago?
Oh, you'd like that, wouldn't you?
I think he's great casting for Eddie Brock. He's a possessive, creepy weirdo who lies and cheats to get ahead of Parker, and his self-concocted downfall is pretty funny to watch.
Parker, you are such a Boy Scout. When are you gonna give a guy a break?
As well as when he gets bodied by Gwen.
About that amazing night that we had.
We had coffee, Eddie.
But that's unfortunately all we get. The main problem with Venom is that he comes into the movie far, far too late. And considering the fights against Gobby and Ark are two of the best superhero battles in all of cinema, it's massively disappointing that Spider-Man and Venom barely come to blows. I was actually really disappointed as a kid when it came out. I vividly remember being so hyped to see Venom and Spider-Man fight, and then being just bitterly disappointed to see them punch each other like twice. Whilst there are some great moments in the final battle, there's actually relatively little Venom action. He kind of disappears periodically whilst Sandman does most of the heavy lifting. The Green Goblin pulverises Peter, and by all accounts Venom should be even stronger. I don't mind the symbiote being of alien origin, even if the series' villainy had been built on the principle of unexplained mad science. However, it is so slapdash to see it smack into the ground in a meteorite. Could John Jameson not have picked it up? After all, he is the cuck boy of Spider-Man 2. I've seen fans suggest that he could have been Venom, but given everyone's penchant for comic book accuracy, I don't think that was ever a possibility. Even though it would have made more sense and a rivalry had already been pre-established. Also, what is up with the news reporters at the end of this movie feeding the scripts to us?
He seems to have come out of nowhere to answer the prayers of the city, just when all hope seemed to be lost.
Spider-Man is now swinging upwards to face Venom. Let's hope that all-important character arc is fulfilled. Back to you in the studio.
The brutality of it. I don't know how we can take any more.
I hate it when you hear a British accent in a movie. It's almost as bad as on YouTube. Gwen Stacy is a complete afterthought in this movie. As much as I like Bryce Dallas Howard's take on the character, her role in the movie would have fit better with Ursula or even Betty Brant, since she knows Eddie. Much like Venom, she's a comic book character wedged into the plot for fan service. In an earlier version of the finale, Gwen was supposedly the one who would be captured by Venom. I think this would have been far better for both Gwen and MJ. Gwen would have had something to do in the finale of the movie, and we'd be able to explore her relationship to Eddie once he's become empowered by the symbiote. Plus, MJ would have presumably gotten to help Peter and Harry. No longer a damsel in distress for the third time in a row. Having MJ play the same part in the finale undercuts the work that is done with the character at the start of the movie. We get to spend some more time with her and actually get things from her perspective. We kind of get a lessened version of what happens to Peter in Spider-Man 2. Nothing seems to be going right for MJ.
If you'd like, we could say you became ill.
She gets let go from her play, Peter is oblivious to her pain.
No, I know exactly how you feel. I don't know, I guess I've become something of an icon.
Side note, I love how much Peter fucks this up, talking about himself, completely ignoring MJ, and then diving straight into the introductions with a suspiciously platonic hot friend. Damn, dude, it's like you want to sleep on the couch tonight.
I don't believe this. I don't believe you.
And to top it all off, she watches Spider-Man kiss another woman in front of everyone. A kiss that was a special moment in their relationship.
I hope Pete's getting a shot of this.
I wish we could have gotten a little bit more of this perspective, and it would have been really cool to see her work together with the boys to stop Venom and help Gwen. I'm not talking about suiting up, by the way, that would be awful. No offense, other Gwen. I'm talking more like how Emma Stone's Gwen helps Peter at the end of The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Hell, I'll take Shotgun Mary Jane from Web of Shadows. Maybe it would have been cool to have her stalked by Venom whilst Peter is preoccupied in the battle. Would have been one of those Hulk Black Widow type situations where the hero is horrifically outmatched and the scene is played more for scares and danger. I digress. The salient point is that anything would have been better than being the third time damsel in distress. Peter and MJ's relationship doesn't really conclude in a satisfying way, and it's left a little open-ended as to whether or not they actually get back together, presumably so Raimi could have started them off anywhere if he were to return. There's no doubt Spider-Man 3 is a mixed bag, and yet still the good stuff outweighs the bad for me. You can see where Raimi's vision shines through. Had studio interference not derailed this third film, maybe we'd be looking at the end of the trilogy much differently. Either way, I'm glad Raimi stuck to his guns and walked away from Spider-Man 4 when it seemed like Sony were going to pull the same tricks. Without studio interference, we could have gotten another Spider-Man 2 in Spider-Man 3, and instead now we never will. I say we never will, but damn, Raimi doing a superhero movie again and Tobey Maguire being in the MCU are two things that sounded impossible a few years ago. One thing I do know is that Sony and Disney like money, and a Raimi Maguire return would make a ton of it.
It's the choices that make us who we are, and we can always choose to do what's right.
Spider-Man Homecoming. Spider-Man Homecoming was Marvel's first shot at an MCU solo outing with the character, and the third solo Spider-Man movie during the 2010s to live in the 10-year anniversary shadow of a previous Raimi effort. Thankfully, Spider-Man Homecoming broke the long streak of bad Spider-Man movies.
There he is. There he is.
It was a reliably made, entertaining effort. It didn't exactly break into the very top of Spider-Man film canon, but I enjoy it a lot and Holland is great in the role. A lot of people really love this movie, and I can totally see why.
Thor, Hulk, good to finally meet you guys.
After making a brilliant extended cameo in Civil War, Tom Holland gets the chance to shine here as nerdy teen Peter Parker. Ned might be largely lifted from Genki, but he's still MVP.
Some hats wear, man. You wear that hat.
Yeah, he gives me confidence.
Tom Holland and Jacob Batalon have an easygoing chemistry that makes this feel like a proper friendship.
Just him treating me like a kid all the time. It's not cool. But you are a kid.
And if you got spider powers, of course you would suck at hiding it from your best friend. You'd no doubt want to tell them and hype them up about it. And of course you and your friend would have a million questions and be constantly amazed by this. It'd be the coolest thing to ever happen to you.
Can you summon an army of spiders?
No, Ned.
Of course you'd want to be the guy in the chair. It would be awesome.
I'm looking at porn.
I think what Homecoming gets way more than the Amazing movies is that Peter and Ned are actual nerds.
Join me and together we'll build my new Lego Death Star.
Lego building, Star Wars enthused, science obsessed nerds.
What?
So lame.
And in spite of Holland's good looks, they look like nerds too. The pecking order at school places them as true in-betweeners. Not the nerdiest kids, but not cool enough to avoid getting bullied.
I don't know. I gotta check my calendar first. I got a hot date with Black Widow coming up.
We've already had the physical bully Flash Thompson twice over, so it's nice to get a bit of a refresh. Plenty of bullies know how to hurt you without laying a finger on you, and we see Flash's rich boy attitude come out several times in the movie. Peter wants to date Liz, be a hero, do well at school, and be there for his aunt, and the push and pull between his responsibilities and desires is well handled under the umbrella of a high school comedy.
That is false.
What did I tell you about using the bell for comedic purposes?
Martin Starr's teacher is great, and I think all the kids are pretty likeable and memorable. Midtown High feels like a living, breathing place, as does Queens.
Okay, Spider-Man! Don't flip! Yeah!
There's a fun, bouncy tone to Homecoming that doesn't quite reach the highs of John Hughes, as was oft mentioned in the marketing, but it does capture that awkward teen angst well. MJ, or Michelle, is cold and closed off and sometimes a bit of a dick.
You guys are losers.
But then why do you sit with us?
Even if she's rarely wrong and usually pretty funny.
Because I don't have any friends.
And as a teenage character, I think that's a pretty fun way to take it. Loads of people acted out and did stupid, embarrassing, cringeworthy things at school. They tried to be someone they weren't. They put up a front. And having a character like this iteration of MJ in the movie helps to make these kids feel real.
He already quit marching band and robotics lab. I'm not obsessed with him, I'm just very observant.
Dumb decisions trying to impress each other in this movie, Peter included.
Peter knows Spider-Man!
And it works, because they're in high school.
Look, so cute.
No wonder Peter would rather go to a party than chase down the Shocker. Still, he leaves Liz at the homecoming dance to take on her father, Michael Keaton's The Vulture.
Hot dog. Hot dog.
The conflict between his desires in his personal life and his responsibilities as Spider-Man are well and present here, albeit in a less dramatic and ultimately cathartic way as in the Raimi series. Now, I know a lot of people hate Spider-Man's relationship to Iron Man, and I can certainly understand some of that criticism. At the same time, the Amazing series did a take on Uncle Ben that made the whole thing feel redundant. So I can see why Marvel didn't want to rehash the origin story for a third time. It made sense for Tony to be a mentor figure, ushering Spider-Man into a larger world after being left out for so long. People forget how eager everyone was for Spider-Man to be a part of the MCU at the time. It's only now that we've had so much of him crossing over with other heroes that we're hungry for something a bit more isolated. So I don't think it was a bad call to opt out of rehashing the origin story and bringing in Iron Man and Happy as those mentor figures. The problems come further down the line in Far From Home, because it's kind of weird that we get to that point and no one has even mentioned Uncle Ben by name, even if his presence has been alluded to a few times. There is such a thing as going too far the other way. I don't need a retread a la the Amazing movies, but I don't need total omission a la the Homecoming movies either. The villain being connected to Iron Man also makes way more sense in this film, and it was a time before it became a bit of a running joke. It makes sense that the Vulture's business would be interested in the Chitauri, and it makes sense that Stark would be the ones to shut him down.
So now the assholes who made this mess are getting paid to clean it up?
Those people, Pete, those people up there, the rich and the powerful, they do whatever they want. We build their roads and we fight all their wars and everything.
Peter is sympathetic to Adrian Toomes and his motivations, but still can't ideologically align, and this provides a meatier conflict between hero and villain than anything shown in the Amazing movies.
Guys like us, you and me, they don't care about us.
Homecoming is class conscious in a way every good Spider-Man tale should be. Yeah, he gets a lot of gear from Tony Stark, but when he says he's on a scholarship, he's not really lying. The only reason he knows Stark is through his own actions, will, and good deeds. He was Spider-Man before Stark, a point referenced by the red and blue pyjamas in the third act. Homecoming provides the first symptoms of the problems with Holland's Parker, but it is not the cause of them. It features Tony Stark in a more palatable way, and feels like a proper stab at a Spider-Man high school adventure on film. The action is pretty tame in terms of fights. Peter doesn't really throw a punch, and most of the fighting involves him webbing up goons or relying on gadgets.
I'm shocked.
Vulture gets stuck in a little more at the end. But the majority of the spectacle revolves more around Spider-Man saving people, which is actually pretty good. I detailed how much I liked both the monument and boat rescue scenes in a previous video, so I won't repeat myself much here. But suffice to say, these are well-made sequences with legitimate tension. The clarity of danger is clear throughout, and Peter is pushed to his limits. He tests his fear of heights, his speed, his strength, his nerve. After a little deliberation, I think Homecoming is definitely superior to Far From Home. So far, it's the best Tom Holland appearance, next to his stint in Civil War. If you do want to find out what I had to say about those rescue scenes, or you want to hear me talk about the Vulture in more detail, then please check out these videos. Here's hoping Spider-Man No Way Home will finally be a contender to push Homecoming off the throne.
This is all my fault. I can't save everyone.
Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Now we enter the stage of this list where all of the Spider-Man movies are great, near-perfect movies. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse of course had to come pretty high up on this list. Into the Spider-Verse is a breath of fresh air in so many ways, and it was devoured by the fan base when it was released back in 2018, for very good reason. It was the first animated theatrical Spider-Man film. It was the first Spider-Man film to feature a different protagonist as Spider-Man. It was the first Spider-Man film to feature an aging Peter Parker. And it was the first Spider-Man movie to kill Peter Parker. It's a movie that features so many Spider-Men, and yet the central relationship between Miles and Peter, Miles and Gwen, Miles and his uncle, Miles and his dad, they're all beautifully realised and endlessly engrossing.
You're like me.
I don't want to be.
I don't think you have a choice, kiddo.
At last we had a true successor to the Raimi throne in terms of emotionality, characterisation and catharsis.
With great power comes great responsibility.
The heart of Spider-Man has never been captured as well as it has been in those movies and this one.
When will I know I'm ready?
You won't. It's a leap of faith.
You're the best of all of us, Miles. You're on your way. Just keep going. Just keep going.
It's great to see the rookie Spider-Man in Miles learn from the older, more experienced, more weathered Peter.
You got any Spider-Man tips you can tell me now?
Yeah, I got plenty. Disinfect the mask. You're gonna want to use baby powder in the soup. You don't want any chafing, right?
Anything else?
Nope, that was everything.
Wow.
Jake Johnson's Peter B. Parker is a broken man. He's so good at the Spider-Man thing, he can do it in his sleep.
This is pretty standard Spider-Man stakes. You get used to it.
But he's also lost the eager, wide-eyed teenage optimism from his earlier crime-fighting days. And much like Thor in Endgame, his heartbreak manifests in a bunch of funny ways.
I'm not swinging to the Hudson Valley, Miles. Not after a hearty burger breakfast.
Great power comes
Don't
great...
you dare finish that sentence. Don't do it. I'm sick of it.
This movie's really clever in that it managed to appeal to a wide variety of Spider-Man fan, pay credence to Spider-Man film canon, and yet also be relentlessly original. Fans wanted a movie about an older, weathered Peter. They got it. They wanted something in the spirit of the Raimi films. I mean, in terms of heart, you definitely get that. But you also get the origin of a completely new Spider-Man in Miles Morales. And with him comes his own family and friends and supporting cast. Spider-Gwen, Spider-Man Noir, freaking Spider-Ham, even Penny Parker. It's a great group of Spider-Men, and all of the voice actors are having great fun in their roles.
I'm taking this cube thing with me. I don't understand it.
It's kind of crazy that Spider-Verse manages to give you the older Spider-Man story you wanted, as well as an origin story after we've already had 3 already, and yet somehow it makes it feel fresh. All of the elements boil down to an insanely fun ride that strikes at the heart of the core appeal of Spider-Man. Anyone can wear the mask. Anyone can see themselves in Spider-Man.
If you didn't know that before, I hope you do now.
This ain't the Amazing movies where Richard Parker sets the wheels in motion and only Peter could become Spider-Man. It understands what makes the character appealing. Miles is a great Spider-Man lead, and I can't wait to see him progress in the next 2 Spider-Verse movies. Part 1 and Part 2, eh? Hopefully Holland's Peter and Miles can join Maguire's Peter in having a fantastic Spider-Man trilogy. It goes without saying that the animation style is beautiful. It's unique and frenetic and the perfect look for an animated Spider-Man movie. Animation lends so well to a character like Spider-Man. The control you have over every frame means the creators can capture his superhuman speed and agility like never before, with a wholly distinctive visual style. Every swinging sequence looks incredible, and Miles' first flight as Spider-Man set to What's Up Danger is a hugely satisfying sequence. It's interesting to choose Kingpin as the big bad in a big multiversal adventure. The street-level gangster's motivation is simple, but very human.
It's not always about the money, Spider-Man.
And makes him feel well-rounded in spite of having relatively little screen time. Kingpin is also the first cinematic villain to kill Spider-Man. The end of Chris Pine's Uber Spider-Man is sobering and quick. He's bolstered by a host of other Spider-Villains who show up as muscle, including Scorpion, Green Goblin, and even Tombstone. But of course Dr. Olivia Octavius steals the show. The sarcastic and quipping alternate Ock gives both Spider-Men a run for their money, and makes Peter look like a massive dumbass, which is just endlessly hilarious.
And obviously you've been glitching.
Glitching? No. Why would you even say that?
Her tentacles are a really awesome design. They don't ape the already perfect 2004 live-action portrayal, and instead opt for squishy inflatable arms that can be hidden, and it gives her this weightless floating feel more like an octopus in water. Truly a really original and cool design update to the Ock look. Into the Spider-Verse is only a few years old, and the fact that it can attain such a high place on this list speaks to the sheer quality and instantly iconic status of its characters and moments. This was the Spidey media that made Miles Morales and Spider-Gwen household names.
My name is Gwen Stacy.
I'm from another dimension. Another dimension.
It's the best Spider-Man origin story since the 2002 original. It's the first proper Spider-Man team-up movie, with cosmic elements that never overwhelm the more down-to-earth domestic aspects and problems plaguing our heroes. The animation is breathtaking, but it's Miles himself who cements this as one of the best Spider-Man movies of all time. So now we come to the last movies on the list, the first 2 Raimi Spider-Man films. I'm sure if you've watched any of my previous Spider-Man videos, this will come as no surprise. So many things in the Raimi movies, the first two particularly, are the best of the series. The best of Uncle Ben.
I have a father. His name was Ben Parker.
Remember, with great power comes great responsibility.
The best of Aunt May.
He never doubted the man you'd grow into, how you were meant for great things. I believe there's a hero in all of us that keeps us honest, gives us strength.
I don't know what to do.
You won't disappoint him. You start by doing the hardest thing.
The best of the Bugle.
Hoffman! Yeah? I propose this campaign. Daily Bugle? That's obvious. It's hip.
That's outrageous.
It's now. Some food got poisoned?
I'm a little nauseous, yeah.
It's wild.
Get me a violin.
And how? Me again.
Hello, you're fired.
Boss, wife's on the line. She said she lost a checkbook.
Thanks for the good news. Oh, right, you're unfired. I need you. Come here.
The best action of the series. The best score, hands down. The best origin story. The best Spider-Man. It's also worth noting they are not only the best of, but also the first of the series. Spider-Man got to tell the story from scratch any way it wanted.
Best thing in the world for a kid your age.
So it opted to do the full Uncle Ben tragedy, and beat out a tasty rivalry with Peter's #1 arch nemesis, the Green Goblin. The reboots down the line were always in some way reacting to this movie. They had to, and they would be thrown to the wolves for straying too far or too close to this gold standard. Whilst I may not like the secret origin bullshit in the Amazing movies, or the complete lack of Uncle Ben in the Home movies, I understand that these iterations had to mix it up and try and do something different because the first Spider-Man movie had already nailed all of those beats so well.
Look, when you can do the things that I can, but you don't.
You're a lot like your father. You really are, Peter, and that's a good thing.
And then the bad things happen.
He believed that if you could do good things for other people, you had a moral obligation to do those things.
They happen because of you.
Each new iteration is under pressure to reinvent the wheel, even when that wheel isn't broken.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Sam Raimi's work never has to contend with any of that. But then again, doesn't it just hammer home how ultimately unnecessary reboots are? Sure, sometimes you get Batman Begins, but then other times you get that Hellboy reboot. Did anyone see that? That was fucking dreadful. If we were always going to end up with Tugboat in the MCU, then I wonder what the continuity had been like had they forged ahead with Spider-Man 4. Maybe Maguire's Spider-Man would have aged across a trilogy of new movies and eventually joined the MCU. Whatever studio politics were going on, I feel like the crossover between a version of Spider-Man and the MCU was always inevitable. Still, it was a very different reality in 2015, and I think everyone was clamouring for a fresh take on Spider-Man within the bounds of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Then again, I never thought Tugboat coming back would be a real possibility when I was considering those options, so... ooh.
Oh boy, yeah.
Anyway, this movie draws first blood on all the key moments from the origin, and translates it to the screen with aplomb. Any other high school kid Peter Parker gets bitten by a radioactive spider, and puberty metaphors hit him like a truck. He becomes arrogant with his powers and seeks to use them for self-serving purposes. His Uncle Ben tries to teach him a lesson about responsibility, but his head is too far up his arse to notice.
The Amazing Spider-Man!
He meets Bruce Campbell and the late great Macho Man for some WWE flavoured antics. And of course, the Amazing Spider-Man bests his opponent and goes on to win the prize money. Although he unfortunately ends up on the business end of a raw deal. When Peter lets the thief go with that guy's money, it's hard not to get swept up in his revenge. It does feel good to see that guy get what he deserves, especially after he just screwed Peter over.
I missed the part where that's my problem.
The movie wants you to feel that, it wants you to feel how Parker does, and then with just a gentle transition and very little context, we are shell-shocked into the next scene.
Hey, stay back. Stay back!
My uncle!
The late Cliff Robertson's Uncle Ben is a genuine and sweet presence of love in Peter's life, and to see him ripped away in such a callous manner never fails to get to me.
Peter.
Spider-Man's first true swing is given the pomp and circumstance it deserves. This chase scene ends with an awesome showdown from the carjacker's perspective, and we see how terrifying Spider-Man can truly be. The carjacker's death is pretty dark. Peter doesn't kill him, but he delivers the finishing blow that seals his fate. Peter doesn't get this close to the scent of revenge until 2 movies later, when he tries to drown Sandman wearing the symbiote. The tone that is nailed in this movie is something that I think the genre has slowly lost over time. It's never afraid to have a laugh, but it also takes itself more seriously than its current counterparts. Now everything needs to be a little self-referential and cynical, sometimes to the point where it actually undercuts the drama.
Dr. Otto Octavius.
Wait, no, seriously, what's your actual name?
But Raimi's movies are big and operatic. The characters make grand declarations of love and lament their broken dreams. The action is unyielding and brutal. The payoffs are hugely satisfying. There's an emotional hook with the audience between not just Peter, but all of the characters. From someone important like MJ right down to a one-line New Yorker.
It's all right.
There's importance in being earnest. And these classic Spider-Man movies nail the line between humour and heart. Partly why I'm trepidatious to see the Raimi characters in the MCU is because of that specific tone. I don't want to see Tugboat engaging in improvisational, internet-savvy pop culture chat. I want to see him swing through the air with a choir behind him, preferably reflected off some guy's glasses. The Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies have less in common with the MCU or the Amazing movies, and more in common with Tim Burton's Batman movies. In many ways, I've often seen them as spiritual successors. The scores from Danny Elfman help, but it's also the blend of horror touches amidst a magical reality that makes them both feel larger than life in the same way. Both the Burton Batmans and the Raimi Spider-Mans are like fairy tales to me. Both Burton and Raimi understood that superhero movies should be dark, without necessarily the gritty. They are marvellously unreal, full of weird moments and off-kilter comedy. The tone of both of these superhero movies are distinctive and haven't really been replicated since. And much like the Burton movies, which had Michelle Pfeiffer transformed into Catwoman for a weird cat-nibbling ritual, so too does Raimi's New York have a slightly magical feel to it. The Green Goblin gets his powers through that aforementioned mad science, but that doesn't explain how he's able to influence Harry from beyond the grave in Spider-Man 2. Harry hasn't had any Goblin formula at this point, so Norman is basically a spectre across the trilogy.
Avenge me! No!
Cat rituals, mirror ghosts, mystical goblin, badass. Even Doc Ock's arms, though explained away with artificial intelligence, fit right into that magical feel. Much like Norman, they feel like they have a soul beyond the realm of their scientific explanations.
And these monstrous things should be at the bottom of the river.
These tentacles are really sinister, and that feeling is in no small part due to the incredible puppeteering in conjunction with the visual effects. In No Way Home, the arms are going to be fully CG, and that saddens me. I hope the arms don't feel like background dressing. They were an integral part of Otto's story.
Listen to me now.
Furthermore, in the Raimi movies, coincidences happen all the time. The same couple of people in New York get hit with all the same problems. Uncle Ben's killer has to be the guy to get superpowers. Aunt May has to be in the same bank that Doc Ock is going to rob. His boss's son happens to be marrying the love of his life. Even the appearance of the symbiote feels like some sort of magical divine test, dropping out of the sky at Peter's feet as if on purpose. I think in today's blockbuster discourse, a movie will get ridiculed for having these sort of coincidences. I think that's because movies are so eager to call out their own perceived bullshit before the audience gets a chance. The Spider-Man movies wear their heart on their sleeve, and that earnest approach I was talking about earlier is what makes this off-kilter world work. This is about the people in these superhero stories, from the heroes and villains to the people Spider-Man is working to save. As much as the bridge scene gets more and more painfully post 9/11 with each passing year,
Mess with New York!
apart! You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us!
Dating it considerably, the sentiment is there. Spider-Man's community are just as important as he is. And as much as charlatans like JJ and Norman like to make Peter think the city hates him, it couldn't be further from the truth. I will never forget the first time Green Goblin throws his toys out the pram when he loses. For those of you that don't know, this movie's release was a big deal in the UK because of rating certificates. It was obviously aimed at children, but the BBFC rated it at 12. This was the movie that finally got us the awesome 12A rating, similar to PG-13 over in the States. And all that happened ultimately so that under 12s could be accompanied by an adult to watch this. The film came out in the UK in June 2002, but the new 12A rating was only introduced in August 2002, so a hasty re-release was issued. I unfortunately did not see it in cinemas, and it was Boxing Day 2002 on a crappy VHS that I first experienced the Green Goblin just savaging this spider guy. Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin is downright fantastic, and it's no wonder his return has been met with much fanfare 20 years later.
The Goblin believes in a world of losers and winners. Power is all that matters.
His angular face and creepy voice is perfect, his performance shining through even when he's obscured by a giant metal mask. Thanks to some great writing and an iconic final scene, he is still considered one of the best cinematic Spider-Man villains. He is the head of Oscorp, and yet we repeatedly find him in situations beyond his control.
I never supported your program.
But you can't do this to me.
I'm going to pull your funding. I'm going to give it to them.
In 2 weeks, we'll have lost the contractor quest, and Oscorp will be dead.
Oh, Max, please.
I started this company. You know how much I sacrificed?
He's trapped. The Goblin gives him a chance to regain control. And enact revenge on his enemies in a way he could never achieve as Norman.
You're out, Norman.
Out, am I?
He is empowered by his Goblin alter ego as much as he becomes enslaved by it.
Make him wish he were dead.
Yes.
And then grant his wish.
I love that after the board members at Oscorp are all murdered, the Goblin's sole motivation is simply to torment Spider-Man. He is obsessed by him and tries to hurt the people around him any which way he can. He revels in testing his responsibility as a hero and the troubles that come with leading a double life.
Spider-Man! This is why only fools are heroes.
He loves being the Goblin, but rarely pays attention to how it's destroying his life as Norman.
This girl is important to me. Harry, please.
Tell me how! The heart, Osborn.
He has many great scenes with himself, in a way that I'm sure Paul Bettany dreamt about until WandaVision. Norman is cruel and calculating, but we are given enough of a window into his soul to empathise with his plight. When he pleads with Peter to save him at the end, we want to believe it.
Don't let him take me again. I beg you.
Where Peter manages to reconcile the two halves of his life, Norman's alter ego remains in conflict right up until the final 2 acts of his life, trying to murder Peter, the Goblin, and trying to make sure his son never finds out, Norman.
Don't tell Harry.
And this provides us with the final turn of this pitch-perfect Spider-Man origin movie. Peter cannot let his loved ones into the realm of Spider-Man without endangering them. He cannot tell Harry the truth about his father, he cannot tell MJ how he really feels. The first Spider-Man movie depicts the superhero life as the curse that it is.
All I wanted was to tell her how much I loved her. I can't.
If you're skeptical of the first Raimi Spider-Man movie being so high on this list, then think on the fact that every single superhero movie made in the past 20 years owes something to its approach and its success. We wouldn't have had any of the crossovers or the classics or the iconic moments without the boom that was propagated by Blade, the first X-Men, and this Spider-Man movie.
I don't know, I guess I've become something of an icon.
The first Spider-Man is the blueprint for the modern superhero movie. Its importance only behind the first Batman movie and Superman the movie. By the way, this Flash, Joe Manganiello's Flash, best Flash. Every scene with him in is hilarious.
Leave him alone. Or what? Or his father will fire your father.
It's actually kind of a great wreck. He's both a great bully and a great punching bag.
I wouldn't want to fight me neither.
Pizza time.
Spider-Man 2. You knew this was coming, Pete. Of course, Spider-Man 2 is the single greatest Spider-Man movie of all time. What do I need to say that hasn't already been said and dissected a million times? Spider-Man 2 is one of those movies like The Dark Knight, or Shaun of the Dead, or Empire Strikes Back, films that have been analysed and praised to death.
I like it. Of course you do.
By not only film YouTube, but by media criticism in general.
Happy to pay the bills, Otto.
I've even already covered it a fair few times on this channel. There's this video where I talk about the themes of desire and dreams in Spidey 2 as well as another J.K. Simmons classic. There's this recent video where I spoke about Otto's redemption arc, why the action in the film is the best of the series. There's even an hour-long discussion on what makes it so good for crying out loud. So really it's going to be tremendously hard to say something about it that hasn't been said before. That isn't going to stop me gushing about it for a couple of minutes though. Spider-Man 2 is praised for good reason. It has a near perfect script, full of emotion and real character drama wrapped up in a fairy tale. Spider-Man the movie establishes that with great power comes great responsibility. Spider-Man 2 asks if there's room for your dreams as well. Hero and villain are locked in introspective moral quandaries that complement the other. Can they both not have what they want? What they need? What cost comes for their greatest desires? How much must you suffer in order to resist your true self?
Gonna make you mad not to know who you are. Your soul disappears.
It's wrong that we should only be half alive, half of ourselves.
Listen to me now.
Peter throws Spider-Man away when he realises that he wants to be with Mary Jane. It's just not worth it anymore. When Otto has nothing left, he doubles down on his ego and his compulsion to fulfill his dreams. Both of them have tremendous gifts, and they use them in service of themselves above others. Sure, the train fight is iconic and probably one of the sweetest bits of superhero action ever. But the thing that makes Spider-Man 2 so good
You once spoke to me about intelligence.
is the fact that Peter manages to talk his villain down and pushes him towards a path of redemption.
That it was a gift to be used for the good of mankind.
A privilege.
It's a philosophical and psychological push and pull.
It was my dream.
And for that it makes Otto Octavius hands down the best Spider-Man villain ever. And this is one of the best villain performances ever.
The power of the sun in the palm of my hand.
Not only is he threatening and entertaining to watch, but his drive and his will, both at his worst and his best, makes for a complex and tragic character. Doing the right thing sometimes comes at the cost of what we want. And if we choose to do what's right, we can seek fulfillment without fulfilling those dreams. But also, if we stay true to ourselves and continue to do the right thing, sometimes good things will come our way. There's so many good scenes in this movie, it's an embarrassment of riches. Bruce Campbell is the obnoxious usher.
She's a friend of mine. She asked me to come.
But not to come late.
The Pizza Time opening skit where he has to try and deliver the pizza in time or else he's going to get fired.
Whoa! He stole that guy's pizza!
Every single bit of banter in the Daily Bugle.
What do you know about high society?
Oh, well,
Yeah, don't answer that.
One of my favourite scenes is the planetarium.
Well, here, get a shot of the mayor and his girlfriend.
Wife.
Peter is already in the doghouse at this point in the movie, and yet this scene just piles it all on, one thing after the other. It's funny and sad at the same time. Peter can't grab a drink in an amusing running gag, meanwhile his best friend Harry drunkenly slurs insults in his face.
Isn't that right? Huh, brother?
He loses MJ's respect right before he's forced to find out that she's going to be marrying this hunky astronaut.
Gentlemen, I just want you all to know that the beautiful Miss Mary Jane Watson has just agreed to marry me.
This guy, man, you just can't help but feel sorry for him. Side note, John Jameson, aka Daniel Gillies, plays an incredible antagonist in Coming Home in the Dark, directed by James Ashcroft. It was one of the best things I saw at Fright Fest this year, and it is fantastic. Check it out. You will not believe this guy was John Jameson. If you're not hooked within the first 5 minutes, get back to me. I said in my Strongest Spider video that Peter getting battered is what makes us root for him in the action scenes, and the same is true of the comedy that is derived from his pain. Partly why I can't get behind the Garfield iteration is he's just too cool. This Peter Parker is a laughing stock. He constantly gets bad luck or screws up. In Spider-Man 2 this happens so much that when he finally quits being Spider-Man, who can fucking blame him? It handles the love story of MJ and the fallout with Harry in such a way that it continues the storyline set up at the end of the first movie, but perfectly fits the point of what this movie is trying to deliver.
This doesn't change anything.
In the case of Harry, his entire arc in the movie is in service of the next instalment, and yet it doesn't feel like that because the conflict between them works, and Harry's transformation into something more bitter and insidious feels tragically appropriate. I know people really like the other romances in the Spider-Man films, and they all have some great chemistry, but there's something that leaves you wanting when you see two people doing the classic will they won't they thing. Sure, it's larger than life for Mary Jane to be getting married in the midst of this longing romance, but the whole thing is very Jane Austen anyway. I think the home films are good at realising a true teenage romance, and all of the silly decisions and feelings that come with that, but the romance in Spider-Man 2 is much grander and more affecting. Maybe MJ's a little deranged for running across New York in a wedding dress, but 5 minutes ago an octopus man was trying to blow up the city. And do you remember the cat nibbling ritual?
I've always been standing in your doorway.
Another thing I think adds to that fairy tale feeling is just how much everyone in Peter's life knows he's Spider-Man. MJ knows him from the end of the first movie, even if she doesn't admit that until the end of the second. Aunt May definitely knows by the bank heist and makes it really obvious to everyone but Peter.
You take Spider-Man's pictures, right?
I used to.
I'm pretty sure Robbie Robertson knows.
Pictures. I heard Spider-Man was there.
Hilariously, the only person who has no idea seems to be Harry. So many random bystanders end up finding out who Spider-Man is, and none of them ever sell him out. Why would they? Spider-Man helps bring out the best in everyone he meets. Everyone in Raimi's Spider-Man universe is not without some kind of inherent goodness somewhere inside of them. Even the most crooked villains have sympathetic sides or tragic problems pushing them to the brink. Even JJ refuses to give up Peter Parker.
I don't know who he is. This stuff comes in the mail. You're lying! I swear.
Even Mr. Dickovich can show care for Peter.
He is a good boy.
There's so many great tiny moments like watching Aunt May refuse to steal. Ow! Or watching Joey Diaz get in front of Doc Ock.
You want to get to him, you got to go through me.
Most of Spider-Man's enemies end up redeeming themselves with his help, and when push comes to shove, the best of humanity shines through. The Spider-Man films are uplifting, aspirational, and genuine.
Would you like a piece of chocolate cake?
17 years on, Spider-Man 2 is widely accepted as one of the best superhero movies of all time. It has had enough time to gestate and become a superhero classic. Along with something like The Dark Knight, this is a movie that transcends the genre. It is beloved by comic book fans and general film audiences alike, and it will be remembered for years to come, where other superhero movies will fall by the wayside. So that was my ranking of all the Spider-Man movies. Let me know your rankings in the comments below. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can find me at full_fat_videos. If you want to tweet at me to tell me how bad my rankings are, you can find me at fullfatvideos. I'll be back this week once No Way Home is released for a full review and of course, where it ranks amongst the other Spider-Man movies. Until next time,
Go Web, go!
a big thank you to my full fat tier patrons, Dr. Cheekade and Craig Hurst. If you want to find me on Instagram, you can find me at full_fat_videos. And if you want to find me on Twitter, that's at fullfatvideos. Until next time, do something with milk, I guess.